Temptation's page flies out the door. You follow, you find yourself at war. Watch waterfalls of pity roar. You feel the wound, but unlike before, you discover that you'll just be one more person crying. So don't fear if you hear a foreign sound in your ear. It's all right, ma. I'm only sighing. Disillusioned words like bullets bark as human gods aim for their mark, make everything from toy guns that spark to flesh-colored Christ that glow in the dark. It's easy to see without looking too far that not much is really sacred. And though the rules of the road have been lodged, it's only people's games that you gotta dodge. And it's alright, ma, I can make it. Advertising signs that con you into thinking that you're the one that can do what's never been done, that can win what's never been won. Meantime, life goes on all around you. You lose yourself, you reappear. You suddenly find you got nothing to fear. Alone you stand with nobody near when a trembling, distant voice, unclear, startles your sleeping ears to hear that somebody thinks they really found you. And though the masters make the rules for the wise men and the fools, I got nothing more to live up to.
Hello and welcome. This is Dave Douglas, and this is the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. That's the music of Dominique Eade and Rand Blake. Today I'll be talking with vocalist and composer Dominique Eade about her music, about her many collaborations and mentorships, and about some of the music we will be playing on tour around the United States later this month. Check out all the details about shows at greenleafmusic.com, where you will also find more info about this podcast, as well as how to get the entire catalog of recordings at Greenleaf Music. I hope you'll join us. Thanks for listening, and here is some more Dominique Eade.
For them that must obey authority that they do not respect in any degree, who despise their jobs, their destinies, speak jealously of them that are free, cultivate what they do to be nothing more than something they invest in. While one who sings with his tongue on fire gargles in the rat race choir, bent out of shape from society's pliers, cares not to come up any higher, but rather get you down in the hole that he's in. But I mean no harm, nor put fault on anyone living in a vault. But it's all right, ma, if I can't please him. While them that defend what they cannot see, with a killer's pride, security, it blows their minds most bitterly for them to think that death's honesty won't fall upon them naturally. Life sometimes must get lonely. My eyes collide head-on with stuffed graveyards, false gods I scuff at pettiness that plays so rough, walk upside down inside handcuffs, kick my legs to crash it off, say, all right, I've had enough, what else can you show me? And if my thought dreams could be seen, they'd probably put my head in a guillotine. But it's all right, ma. It's all right, ma. It's life and life only.
So Dominique Eade, we've been talking about having you on this podcast for so long. It's a thrill to get to talk to you.
I'm so glad to be here.
We started with this track where you're collaborating on an arrangement of a Bob Dylan piece with Rand Blake. And I usually start at the beginning, but then I heard that and I was like, well, okay, we need to start right there. And how did that come about? And what is the experience of developing that kind of arrangement with Ran.
Yeah, the whole record that track is from is called Town and Country. It's on Sunnyside, and it is kind of a departure from the repertoire that Ran and I would normally do. Ran and I have been working together for many decades now, four or probably decades, and you were generally doing some kind of standards, some things from, maybe obscure standards covered by singers in the Stan Kenton Band, some film music, and for this period, this was during the election cycle, the first time Trump ran, and there was just such a mood in the air. And one morning I woke up and I said, we should make a folk record. I wrote Ran, he was like, yes. And we quickly determined that it wouldn't be, because we have done some songs, some Catalonian songs that Victoria de Los Angeles did, some things that are kind of in sort of folk, classical European stuff, but we quickly decided to do things more from America. And we just started trading, he calls them oral cocktails. So we started trading playlists, as people would call them, back and forth. And he's the one who chose the Dylan tune, which really surprised me, actually. And there are many, many verses to this song, but we printed them out and we sat down and we both just said, this one speaks to me. He said, that speaks to me. And we just ended up doing those particular verses that we really felt we had something to say.
Wow, that's great. And then how much do you get the feeling like he's worked out what he's going to do versus him?
Sometimes I do. For that very reason, I usually in our records have included two versions of a song. And in this record, there is a Gene Ritchie, the West Virginia coal mine disaster. And I include two takes of that so people can hear how they depart. And they're very different.
Wow.
They can be extremely different. Once he kind of, I don't know, you ever play pickup sticks? It's kind of like once they kind of are thrown down, there it is, and then the track is really to navigate through how everything is balanced. From sometimes maybe I start, but what gets rolled out before us.
That's so cool. Now, is any of that, would you say, the music of your childhood?
Well, Dylan for sure. I'm the youngest of five kids, so my older brother was 11 years older than me, went, to Haight-Ashbury, and I think he was at some Dylan concert in Omaha, Nebraska when I was probably 4 or something. So I heard Dylan really early on, for sure. And this is a track I've known for a long time. The other stuff, not so much. The other stuff, Goodnight Irene, of course. I don't know when I ever first heard that. Elijah Rock, the Mahalia Jackson, is early, but not childhood.
Wow. I mean, one of the reasons I'm asking is that I learned a new detail about you today when I went to Wikipedia, and who knows, maybe it's wrong, but I've known you a long time also, and I didn't know that you had an itinerant childhood, that you were born in London and spent, because your father was in the military, and so you moved all around the globe.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go too far flung as some people do, but yes, lived a lot of places in the United States. My father was a fighter pilot in World War II. Met my mother, who was Swiss, in Paris during the war, and so she came to the United States after the war, and we lived a lot of places in the United States. We lived in England, and I finished. Mostly after I lived in England, really just 6 months after I was born. And when we did the ship crossing, Salvador Dali was on the boat, but I don't remember. I don't remember, but my brother has this vision, this memory of being on one of the galleys when it was kind of stormy and coming across him, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But I was only 6 months old, so I don't really remember England. But I lived a lot of places in the United States, in Louisiana and Texas and Nebraska,
Wow.
Virginia, and then I finished my high school years in Germany. So
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, that's got to have a huge musical impact to be in so many different communities, and I know that your passion and your love for music arose early in your life. So carrying that around to all those different places must have been really a special part of your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the influences that came, I mean, because the military world is pretty insular, so it's
Mm,
not like we're really,
right. So
partake.
right. You're
I mean,
among
all,
Americans.
yeah, except the fact that my mom was European. So even when we lived in Nebraska, I was studying ballet and she was on the, board of the artistic board of directors and brought two ballet dancers, really well-known dancers from American Ballet Theater to be the
Mm,
soloists. So I
hmm.
remember the music from, doing the Nutcracker with them, and they stayed in
Right.
our house. And my mother actually um, the cellist Honegger stayed in our house. I remember hearing him practice. So really, the music that came into the house was what I was hearing more
Honecker
at a
came.
younger.
Honecker came to.
Henry Honegger stayed at our house. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. My mother was, I mean, when she came to the United States, she told me this much later.
Uh-huh.
She was very intellectual and she loved all kinds of authors, but she loved Willa Cather, and she called Willa Cather on the phone and just chatted with her. So,
Wow. She
so
slid into her DMs, as we would say
yeah.
now.
And my father loved music too. I mean, one of the first things they did, my mother was a war bride. They landed in New York and they went and heard Lionel Hampton.
Wow.
So there was a lot of music in the
Yeah.
household, classical and jazz, kind of up to but not including bebop.
Yeah.
And then the things, I'm the youngest of five, so all the music that my siblings were
Right.
bringing in.
I'm the youngest of four, so I can relate to that.
Yeah,
That a
it's
lot of the
so,
music that I got exposed to was what my brother and my two sisters were listening to.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very rich. I mean, it's super lucky, and instruments that get left around the house. We always had a piano. In fact, this is my mom's piano back
Wow.
here, um,
That's
and
my
it wasn't
grandmom's.
really.
Yeah.
Aw. So it really wasn't until later. I mean, we were Catholic, and my sisters, when the mass went from Roman Catholic to
Uh-huh.
being, having a rock and roll mass, so
Oh
my
boy.
sisters would play in that. So there was a little bit of community music, but it wasn't until really till, well, I mean, garage bands and stuff of,
Yeah. Yeah.
misbegotten boyfriends and stuff in junior high school. But it wasn't really till I lived in Stuttgart and I was kind of singer-songwriter playing guitar and writing songs. And that's when I started going out to,
Mm.
clubs because we lived not on the military base. So I would go down into the town of Stuttgart and perform and get to know the scene a little bit there. So
That's amazing.
it was
That
rich,
is
but it was still kind of insular in the way that moving around in the military can be.
right, right, right. But still, I think that I don't, you can slap me and correct me if I'm
Mhm.
totally wrong, but it feels like when I've heard you and your music, there's so many different shades and colors and elements that have
Mm.
gone into it. It sounds like, oh, 1 minute I'm like, wait a minute, shades of little Joni Mitchell, and then there's something else, and all the great jazz singers
Mm.
and everybody, and it sounds like maybe here's where it is. You moving around the earth and having older siblings and having two parents that were artistically engaged and fired up.
Definitely. And, I think also when you travel, I mean, I lived first through, well, kindergarten through almost the end of sixth grade in Nebraska. There's terrains and landscapes
Ah,
and flavors of geography, that also I think affect the music. So, you know,
yeah,
that and being in Germany and my European, there's just, you can't not think about how does all this fit together? How does this all exist on this earth all at one time,
Right. Well, like you said, pickup sticks.
Yeah.
But back to the record with Ran, Town and Country, there's a short track on there called Lullaby, and I guess it was written by Walter Schumann?
Yeah, that's
Is that
the
right?
soundtrack from that amazing
composer.
movie for Night of the Hunter. Incredible movie starring Charles Laughton, who I adore, and it's, I mean, directed by Charles Laughton, and it's really it's an incredible movie. That was something that Ran turned me on to, his love of film, his love of noir. And that movie is something that typically, when we rehearse, it's not unique to me. I don't think it's, you're playing in one room and then he goes, oh, I want to show you this thing. And we go back and where he has all his DVDs and we look at, different scenes from films. And this was one that really resonated at that time. Because there's an ominous feeling of suppression that drives the movie, and yet this feeling that things are going to be okay. And I think that's really what we didn't ever talk about it. We never, said this is, a political CD. It's just that we were feeling those things so strongly that they couldn't help but enter into the music.
Yeah, that was an intense moment, followed by many more intense moments.
Yes,
so this is just under a minute. Why don't we, I'll play the whole thing.
Hush, little one, hush. Hush, my little one, hush. Morning soon will light your pillow. Birds will sing in yonder willow. Hush, little one, hush. Hush, my little one, hush.
Lullaby, that's from the CD Town and Country, Dominique Eade and Ran Blake, and just fantastic, beautiful. I'm so glad you told the story too. It makes me want to ask you like a really basic question. Some singers refer to their voice as their instrument, and some talk about vocal technique and reproduction, and it's too huge of a topic for us to even go, people have spent decades studying with you to ask this question, but I just on a very basic level, and us having played together, how do you think about sound? Contexts where you're delivering melodic content and lyric content and musical.
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm always thinking about sound. I'm always thinking about it, and I think I just came, maybe for reasons that you kind of were hitting upon earlier, because I had been exposed to so many things. I understood that lots of ways of singing were possible. And though I came up during a time where the idea of technique was still very much dominated by classical singing, the idea was, and it can still float out there a little bit like this, which is if you study classically, you can sing anything. And I just figured that can't quite be right. Actually, because I started teaching pretty early, and I was, had classical singers coming to me, kind of to wanting to sound unclassical, but also people would, I'd go to a classical teacher and try to get some ideas of this, that, and the other, and lean into their area of expertise. But then they would say something like, you can't sing without vibrato. and not damage your voice. And I was like, I don't know if that's really true, because what about the whole continent of India? I loved Hindustani, I loved Carnatic singing, still do. And I was realizing it's the same instrument physically the world over. I mean, certain things in language do influence how it sounds, and maybe even some of the physiology, perhaps, of how it develops, maybe. Not really known, but basically it's the same instrument the world over, but people sing so differently because it's an art form. It's a cultural phenomena sound. And what we decide, we like and is pretty, or, not even, maybe pretty is not a value. There's so many different ways. So I've tried to just really, I mean, it's not like I don't care about aesthetics. I care a lot about aesthetics, but I don't want to be aesthetically bound by one kind of sound because it doesn't feel expressive to me, and yet I have to grapple with the persona that I am. I don't want to just, be an imitator of other sounds. So it's really where the, learning how, I mean, I'm sure it's the same for you with trumpet. It's like learning the physiology, the mechanics, which is in voice an ongoing thing. I mean, I was in a master class 2 days ago where the vocal pedagogy person, Matthias Ayen, who came, had scopes of a Tuvan throat singer, which was super cool. So it's an ongoing thing. And I'm always looking at where is it, what's the art part? And what is physiologically possible, and how are we limiting ourselves? So,
do you find like that's part of your preparation? Like I know everyone has a warm up.
Oh God, I'm constantly. I mean, because also I teach, and so I'm always looking for ways to understand where people are at any given moment with their instrument and how they can do what they want to do better and for the long haul, and I've been singing now a long time, and I have lots of students that have been singing a long time. So I know that they have the technical ability to do the things that they want to do and to do it for a long time. So, yeah, you keep in shape. I mean, it's probably not that. I have my trumpet mouthpiece. Sometimes I warm up. Right,
oh my God. I'm so sorry for you. The bane of my existence. But yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's a lot of similarities, but I feel like I have to ask because you've been an important vocal teacher for almost every vocalist that I've worked with for the past 2 decades. Anyone who has sung on any of my records, they studied with you.
Right.
And there's an effortlessness that they've gathered, and I'm sure, maybe it sounds effortless. I know nothing is,
right.
Except for Kenny Warner, nothing is effortless. But a facility in so many different ways, and obviously, just like you were just saying, you've helped them all to become themselves by facilitating their ability to sound like what they want to sound like. And
right.
To keep doing it.
And I can't know. I mean, if they're studying with me as 18, 23, 25-year-olds, I can't know where they're going to go.
Yeah.
So I can't give them a limited toolbox, So some of it has to do with sound production, the technique of singing, but it goes right hand in hand with imagination, with aesthetic awareness, and real rigor in musicianship. There's no getting around that either, and there shouldn't be. So, and I think, I'll take some of the credit, but I also think that at New England Conservatory, people just get a really good education in all of those things, and it really helps them. And I think the other thing is that I don't think about style, I guess, as an external thing. Like putting on shoulder pads or something to sound jazzy or whatever.
Go on.
Well, I mean, because I mean, who was it? Was it Gil Evans said every jazz musician should be a sound innovator? If you think of all the different singers, from Burt Williams to Sarah Vaughan to Chet Baker to, Blossom Dearie. I mean, think of all the different voices that there are. There's nothing that there's not a checklist that defines that person as a jazz singer. I mean, or whatever style of singer they are. It's that they know the music. It's like, they don't take it on like an affectation. And so
they have an idea what they want to sound like, and they figure out how to get there.
Yeah, or it's the combination of all the things. I mean, I don't think I sing the same with, Donald Brown. I don't sound the same as with Donald Brown as I do with Rand Blake. Timbrally, it's a soup, right? It's the pianos all are the same physical instrument. Each person sitting at them sounds so different, and so if you're going to play sing with them, it's going to be different. So it isn't like this is me, this is my sound, but it's sound awareness, and that includes everything around you.
Wow, that's great. That's fantastic. Transitioning to the record that we made that's just coming out on CD, and following up where you just left off about sound and sound world, when you add delivering words, delivering lyric, how much does that take over the process for you?
I mean, the whole interplay between whatever pitches one is singing and whatever, first the meaning of the language, the sound of the syllables and the consonants and the vowels, and then that combination of the way the meaning and the sound of the language are together. Add that with pitch. It's a tall order what singers are doing, And I when I was younger, I was like, I'm not, if you were doing work in recording studios, you'd have to join AFTRA, not the. I mean the. Is that the theater one? I can't even remember. But yeah. And I was like, damn it, I'm not an actress. I'm a vocalist. And I felt that way about just even in terms of presentation. And I really, because I love the instrumental tradition in jazz just as much as I love the vocal one. So I sort of felt a little bit, maybe resentful that maybe I have to be this person to put a facade on all of this. I see it very differently now because the words just in and of themselves are so powerful. And so there's so much music in them that you almost have to be in an actorly frame of mind to perceive all of that and then combine it with music. So the text, it's really it's challenging. I mean, the record with Rand, for instance, somebody might say, well, how are you going to do all of these different kinds of musics together? I never felt that because I know it's going to be us. It's going to be our sound. With the record that you and I did, there wasn't an us. Like, I didn't know what that would be. And these are poems that have never been sung before.
Yeah.
And so I feel, even getting ready for this tour now, I feel like I'm going just deeper and deeper into the sonic and meaning, the sonic properties and the meaning of these words even more. But even just on a very mundane level, what happens with the way the vowels go, for instance, is completely different can be completely different from the tessitura of the melody. We talk about dark and light vowels and timbral. So you can go from a very dark vowel up high, down to an E low. Some people, because it's a different side of the brain, some people will say the frequency went up. because the timbral aspect is so powerful for them. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And it's pretty wild. So if
it's
you
also
say
overtones, I suppose.
yeah,
right?
it's
the quality of the wave.
It's the formant of the vowels, exactly. And there are more than one formant. The first and second are kind of the predominant ones, so you can make a darker E or a brighter E. So you have a lot of. There's just such an amazing palette that vocalists have that I think does. When I think actors have to think about that because they're conveying meaning through that, and they don't have the frequency of the melodies to convey the meaning. So it's become really interesting to really delve into text on that level. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I'd imagine that these haikus, they add a level of challenge, but you deliver them so beautifully. This one. To be honest, every time you deliver the last line of this song, I want to cry. I mean, in a good way.
Yeah.
Not like, oh my God.
Why did you do that? Well, the thing is...
No, it's very, very powerful, the delivery of it. And it's a very strong sentiment and it's short. And so I wrote 2 settings of the same. We Saw You Off and Returning Through the Fields. I thought the morning dew had wet my sleeve, but it was tears. All of this that you're talking about with vowels and tessitura and timbre comes to play here, as well as delivering the meaning of the lyric, as well as any AFTRA actress ever would have.
Thank you. I'll take my royalties. Checks in the mail.
All right, I'll play this.
We saw you off and returning through the fields. I thought morning dew had wet my sleeve, but it was we saw you off and returning through the fields. I thought morning dew had wet my sleeve.
That's Dominique Eade singing We Saw You Off from this new album that's called If There Are Mountains, which comes from a Santoka poem that begins, If there are mountains, I look at the mountains.
Love
Yeah,
it.
you're so such a great. That's such a great expressive delivery of both sets of lyrics, and each time it comes around, it functions slightly differently, and I just feel like you're really tuned into all those different meanings, and it's great. So we haven't spoken about you as a composer yet. And I know that's an important aspect of your work as well. And so I was thinking that we could listen to Ballad for Franz Wright,
Thank you.
which I believe is your words and music, right?
Yes, yes, it is.
Now, what is this from a commercially released recording or?
No, thinking about music to send you for this podcast, I wanted to do things that related maybe to the idea of poetry, since we're doing this around the release of the CD. And so I thought of this song, and I mean, I write a lot, and I haven't recorded probably half of what I write, but
You
some of
know,
it I've gotten out for gigs,
we
which is
should get
good.
you putting out some of this great music, because we were actually label mates back in
That's
the day.
true.
We were both on
That
RCA before the consolidation of the entire major label environment. But
universe, yeah.
so it's classic quartet, voice, piano, bass, and drums. Tim Ray, John Lockwood, Uran Israel. I tell me a little bit about this if you can.
This is a live recording from Jordan Hall at New England Conservatory. I mean, maybe
Hmm.
10 years ago, I think, one of like a faculty recital. And uh, I usually do this piece. I've done this with Donnie, actually, McCaslin, playing
Hmm.
soprano and doing a soprano part, which is nice. This time around, it was just with this quartet. Tim Ray and John Lockwood, I mean, especially John Lockwood, he was in my very first band when I moved to
Wow.
Boston. And so we've worked together in all kinds of configurations for a really long time. Tim Ray and I also a long time. Euron and I not as much, but it was great that he could do this. I've sung some of
Yeah.
his music
Wow.
as well, but I thought he sounded great on this. Franz Wright is a poet I really loved, and I live in an area of Newton which borders Waltham, which is the town that he lived in, and I discovered after really feeling very close to a lot of the things that he had written that he would walk in the same area that I walk almost daily, and so this lyric is kind of about maybe almost an imaginary meeting with him. What
Huh.
might I say?
And this is your setting of a
My own
poem
lyric.
that you wrote based on. Okay, let's listen to this.
Don't turn away. Can't you see there's an amber light still shining in the west where we left it not long ago? And if I go, I will come back, if only just to tell you that the light is still shining far to the west. Over and over, the same voice may call you, but are you so certain the same fate will befall you? Will my heart forever be unknown here till the light that left us brings us home again?
That's gorgeous. Ballad for Franz Wright. And boy, this is the question that writers and composers get asked all the time, okay, which came first? So I'm not going to ask you that, but it's like, especially with lyrics, I've found so much of it has to sort of all move up the field at the same time, to use a sports metaphor.
That's right. And then
Is
there's
that the way that worked for you?
The Hail Mary pass.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. But it isn't always the same. I mean, that's the thing, is that, I mean, sometimes there are just questions rolling around in my head, and they take shape, and they take a musical shape at the same time. Sometimes I might just be at the piano and come up, with a sound that I like, and the collision of the questions and the thoughts and the melodic ideas with the harmonic. It happens a lot of ways. I mean, sometimes it does happen that a whole piece of music is written and I feel like it's going to have lyrics, but it doesn't yet. That's a lot harder. I'm like, it's like you have to go back and pick somebody up.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it doesn't end up being any less organic. It just can take a lot more time. Or sometimes I'm working on a more extended thing right now where it was very lyric driven, and I'm fashioning the music, but there's, as I was saying before, there's so much music in words that it's not just like any old music is gonna to do. So you really have to chisel away and find out what is the music that these words are embodying. So the process is different every time.
That's really interesting what you said about once you've written something and you don't have the words, but it needs to have them, how much more of a struggle that is. I can really relate to that. It's easier, I feel, when the words are there from the beginning.
I think so, or some germ
goal.
of
it. Yeah. Like in the case of that, where you wrote the lyric too, you probably had snippets of lyrics that translated gradually events, and the whole thing came about that way, I would imagine.
I think it did coalesce to get, kind of at the same time. But, there is the thing of kind of doing the dumb lyrics or the, sonic sounds that maybe will end up being similar to the words. That happens too. Because actually, I think a lot of wordless intonation of sound holds a lot of meaning also, and that the meaning, that the literal meaning is really just one of the meanings. So not like I've written things that are, all the way sound poetry, but, sometimes I realize like it's the sound of the word.
Right.
That's resonant, like Mary Oliver says, what's the difference between rock and stone? In meaning, not that much. And in the sonic realm where lyrics live, it's quite different.
Yeah. And there's a meaning beyond words. I heard someone saying, we're a natural historian, saying we know that there has to be meaning beyond words because we're the only species on the earth that uses words.
Good point. Very, very good point.
I wish I could remember it better and remember who it was, but yeah. So that's some wonderful insights, and I wonder, coming back to your important role as a mentor to young musicians, and you've been at New England Conservatory now for some decades,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes, I have.
And I guess my question, I'd be interested in all, talking about your creative work and your composing and creating a sound. How much does being a mentor feed that process? Is there a conversation, a back and forth between the two activities?
I'd say a lot, especially if somebody doesn't show up and then I can write a tune. No, I'm just kidding.
No. Be honest.
That has happened. Actually,
Yeah.
So Long September, another track I sent you. I still remember the kid who didn't show up for that lesson. So, but that kind of shows you that.
Do they get extra credit when that happens?
No credit. It kind of makes you realize, like, yeah, when you're teaching, you're set up and ready to paint, and it's the student coming in that's part of the collaboration of that creative thing that's going to happen. I think of teaching as very creative. So when a student doesn't show up and there you are with all of that energy and focus, it is a time that I end up writing. But the exchange of ideas, the being in process, just the interesting people I get to know through teaching, honestly, I mean, I really, people often are saying, oh, you must be so proud of this person that got the Grammy or this person who does this. But I'm just so very proud of all of my students because I just get to know what they're working with, what they're going through in their lives, how they're putting their lives together. And I kind of feel them, I feel a little bit like the old lady that lived in a shoe, kind of. They're all welcome in that house and all at play, and so it's inspiring, and they do great things. They influence me, they inspire me. It can be, I could sideline myself sometimes by feeling like I have to be exemplary because I'm this teacher, and then whoever feels exemplary, I mean, music just doesn't let you feel that, So I have to be careful, not to.
Wow, that's a really, really good point. Yeah. Wow.
And so that, I'm careful about that, but it's real inspiring. It's just really, really inspiring. And a student of mine's, Ian Dyson, did this great recital a couple of nights ago, and she just did, a lot, all original music and kind of some really interesting things where she had written this long song, which she had performed in little bits throughout, as little, file cards between all the other pieces. Just really creative, really interesting. And I teach a lot of instrumentalists too, and just knowing what inspires them. It's just an inspiring thing to do. And I don't think some people, like Kevin White has like, I heard I could tell it's your student, so-and-so. I was like, yeah, you might know that's my student, but you know, like Kenya Seymour is my student, or, Michael Mayo, or whomever. And so I'm always glad that people can't completely guess who my students are, because I don't think that there's like one sound that I'm like, teaching everybody to do. It's like just this exploration. And I just feel really lucky to do it. Really lucky.
Anywhere that I go in the world, the people I'm meeting, I just always assume that they've been your students. Doesn't matter.
Oh, there's plenty out there that have studied with a number of other wonderful, wonderful teachers.
Wow. New England Conservatory, of course, I went there for 1 year. Back, it was before the American Civil War, but still, but it's allowed you, it's opened up some opportunities for collaborations that must be a really wonderful thing. And you sent me a recording of yourself with Dave Holland, with this setting of Maya Angelou, and I thought I would just play some of that. And it does, Is this also Jordan Hall?
It is, yeah.
So there's a certain reverberation
you can tell
from that
right?
stage.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know it now very well, you know. It's kind of like a speaker that you're really familiar with, where the resonances are and stuff. So,
and is this a setting that you wrote?
this is Dave's piece, Equality, which he originally recorded with Cassandra Wilson.
Wow.
And he and I, I ended up studying with him because while I was still on faculty, I did an artist diploma where I studied with Dave Holland and Stanley Cowell. And this is many years later, but Dave and I he recorded on my second RCA CD with me. And then this is a much more recent from a duo concert that we did that was part of a summer school that happened at NEC called Jazz Lab. So he played the first half solo bass, which hearing him in Jordan Hall solo bass is just phenomenal. And then he and I did a short second half.
Nice. Well, it's beautiful. I'll play some of this. Equality, Dave Holland.
You declare to see me dimly through a glass which will not shine, though I stand before you boldly, trim in rank and marking time. You do own to hear me faintly as I whisper out of range, and my drums beat out the message, and the rhythm's still the same. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free. You announce my ways are wanton, for I fly from man to man. But if I'm just a shadow to you, could you ever understand? We have lived a painful history. We have known a shameful past. But I keep on marching forward, and you keep on coming last. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free.
That's beautiful, Dominique. Thanks for sending me that. I wasn't aware of it. It's really fantastic. And we're going to wrap up here. But you did send me a track of yourself playing in a quartet with Bill Pierce, Brad Shepik, and Ben Street, playing Don Cherry's piece, Remembrance. So we'll play some of that. It's such a great tune. But you also do something on this that you rarely do in the context we've been playing in. And now that I've heard this, I'm going to push for more. And that is scatting. How do you feel about it? Scatting being... wait, you probably have a better definition than me. But when I use the word, I mean bebop influenced,
Uh-huh.
wordless vocal improvising,
Well,
like a horn player.
Do you hear, if you list like the track with Dave Holland, I solo over that form, and I solo at the end of Ballad for Fronts, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like this,
But
are you asking about something different?
I feel like that's not what I wouldn't call that scatting.
That's interesting.
Because that's more an improvisation in, that growing out of a composition and kind of taking the shape of
right. But I mean, the
part.
skill of it is still the same, that you got to know chord changes and know language and understand historical. I mean, you wouldn't feel that different, right? If you were soloing on a tune like, I mean, do you think of it as different?
I think if I was playing a minor blues like Don Cherry's Remembrance at the tempo that you all play it, I would feel that I had to include certain elements that are perhaps could be from the outside heard as more traditional.
Got it.
Than maybe I normally would.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I loved, like I said, I've always loved the instrumental tradition, and Clifford Brown, was a big influence. But even maybe because of my parents, like, I was hearing Fats Waller, when I was a kid and stuff. I guess I feel like the bebop language that people learn in school, it's like, it in one way is like an epitome of something, but there's like this whole thing that happens before it, and this whole thing that happens after it. So I guess I hear it in a continuum. Not that I wouldn't want to have that skill to do that thing of being able to solo in and I love scats. I mean, in my jazz vocal traditions, I've been teaching people that singers and instrumentalists never heard, like Leo Watson, who was super influential on Ella. And so I never, going back to that thing about words, I mean, yes, text and the sound of the preordainedness of what the text is and the sound of it and all that is amazing. But I feel like so much is conveyed through sound anyway. And that, babies babble the world over the same up to a certain point. And so I feel like there must be lots of, like, going back to your point about meaning and sound, there must be so much meaning in that. And I've never thought about scatting as not caring about words. I hear it as an extension of the feeling. And in this case, remember, it has no lyric.
Right.
But it's a feeling of an extension of a feeling of the song.
Wow, that's great. And speaking of other singers in the extra for this episode, you brought up Come Sunday from Black, Brown, and Beige with Mahalia Jackson. So we'll spend a little time talking about that for the special extra. So we are meeting next week in Boulder, Colorado, and then we're going on a little tour playing the music from this new record, and I'm so grateful that I'll get to see you again and we'll get to make the music. I hope that people come out and hear it. Other than this and the rest of the semester, what's going on for you? Any new plans?
Yeah, I am going to be doing a concert with Rand Blake in his old hometown of Springfield, Mass. And so when I get back from the tour, we're already exchanging emails about repertoire, and he likes to get together and rehearse a lot. And so when I come back, we'll start in to rehearse that. And then at the end of April, I'll be singing the Ellington Sacred Music at the Trinity Church in Copley Square, with under the direction of Greg Hopkins.
Wow.
And I've sung that once before with him, and I'll be, working on those pieces when I get back.
That's so great. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to go out with this incredible scat singing solo. No, just incredible piece of music.
I like scat singing. You can call it that.
Thank you, Dominique. It's great to talk. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. Really a pleasure.
Okay.
Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Noise from the Deep with Dominique Eade. Hope you enjoyed it. There's an extra for subscribers where we talk about Mahalia Jackson. Be sure to check that out. Come on over to greenleafmusic.com to get the entire catalog and to support all of the work that we do at the label. Thanks so much.